They thought they were just bullying a quiet kid in a mall food court. They had no idea they were about to pick a fight with a colonel. The scent of Cinnabon and cheap perfume usually meant a good day at the mall. That day, it smelled like trouble. I was tucked into a corner of the food court, my sketchbook open, waiting for my mom to pick me up. Her text had said she was running late, stuck in a debriefing, which was her code for something I wasn't allowed to know about. So, I did what I always do. I drew. I was shading the intricate scales on a dragon's wing when a shadow fell over my page. "What's that you're drawing, sweetie?" The voice was syrupy sweet, but laced with the kind of poison I knew all too well. I didn't even have to look up. Tiffany. Of course it was Tiffany, flanked by her two giggling clones, Ashley and Brittany, and her Neanderthal boyfriend, Chad. I kept my eyes on my drawing, hoping they'd take the hint. "A dragon." "A dragon," she repeated, a mocking lilt in her voice. "How creative." Her friends snickered on cue. "You know, your hair kind of looks like a bunch of little dragons all coiled up like that." There it was. It always came back to my hair, my skin, something that made me different from them. I slowly closed my sketchbook, the soft scratch of the pencil on paper the only sound I was willing to make. "Can I help you with something, Tiffany?" Chad, who had been flexing his non-existent biceps in the reflection of the Sparrow sneeze guard, swaggered closer. He leaned over the table, his cologne an assault on my senses. "We were just wondering why you're always alone, hiding in corners. Don't you have any friends?" "I have friends," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "They just don't hang out at the mall on a Tuesday." "Oh, that's right," Tiffany cooed, tapping a long acrylic nail on my sketchbook. "Your mom makes you come straight here after school, right? Like you're on some kind of leash. Is it because she doesn't trust you?" A hot spike of anger shot through me. They knew nothing about my mom. They saw a single mother who was rarely at PTA meetings and assumed the worst. They had no idea that her business trips involved sand-colored fatigues and landscapes that looked like the surface of Mars. They didn't know the quiet, coiled strength she carried in her shoulders, or the way her eyes could see everything in a single glance. "My mom trusts me just fine," I said, pushing my chair back to stand up. "I should get going." "Not so fast," Chad said, stepping into my path. He was a good foot taller than me, all puffed-out chest and empty confidence. "Oops," Tiffany shrieked with fake surprise. Her hand, holding a massive cup of cherry slushy, suddenly jerked. An icy red wave cascaded over my open backpack, soaking my history textbook and the corner of my sketchbook that was peeking out. The sticky, cold liquid seeped through the canvas of my bag instantly. My breath hitched. I stared at the spreading crimson stain. My drawing, the one I'd spent 3 days perfecting, was probably ruined. The laughter from her friends was sharp and cruel. People at nearby tables glanced over, then quickly looked away, not wanting to get involved. That was the worst part. The silence of everyone else. Tears pricked at my eyes, hot and furious. But I refused to let them fall. My mom taught me better than that. "Never let them see you break," she'd always say. "Your composure is a weapon." I took a deep breath, unzipped my bag, and carefully pulled out the sketchbook. The bottom corner was soaked, the ink from my dragon's tail bleeding into a blurry pink mess. My heart sank. "Oh, look at that," Tiffany said, her voice dripping with fake pity. "It's ruined. What a shame." I looked up from the ruined page and met her eyes, and for the first time I didn't look away. "You did that on purpose." Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "Prove it." I carefully placed my sketchbook on the table to dry, my movements deliberate. I slung my damp backpack over my shoulder. "I don't have to. People like you always show their true colors eventually." I tried to sidestep Chad, but he moved with me, blocking my way again. "Where do you think you're going?" he grunted, putting a heavy hand on my shoulder. His touch was like a spark on a fuse. "Get your hand off me," I said, my voice low and dangerous in a way that surprised even me. He just laughed, his grip tightening. "Or what? You gonna call your mummy?" Tiffany snatched my sketchbook from the table. "Let's see what other weird stuff you've got in here." She started flipping through the pages, her and her friends laughing at my drawings of fantasy creatures and portraits. Each laugh was like a physical blow. That book was my private world. My hands clenched into fists. I felt the vibration of my phone in my pocket. A text. I knew it was from my mom. I needed her. Right now. But I was trapped. Tiffany was holding my soul hostage, and her gorilla of a boyfriend had me pinned. "Give it back," I demanded, my voice trembling with rage. "Make me," Tiffany taunted, holding the book just out of my reach. She held it over the trash can. "Maybe this is where this garbage belongs." That's when I heard it. A small chime from my pocket. My mom's unique text tone. "I'm here. Food court entrance." "Where are you?" Chad must have heard it too, because he sneered. "What's that? Mommy's here to save the day?" He pushed me back a step. "You're not going anywhere." Panic began to bubble in my chest, hot and suffocating. They weren't going to let me leave. My mom was just yards away, but she might as well have been on another continent. Then something shifted. It wasn't a sound that made them freeze. It was a feeling. A sudden sharp drop in the temperature of the entire food court. The background chatter seemed to die down, the clatter of trays fading into a dull hum. Tiffany's smug smile faltered. Chad's grip on my shoulder loosened, his head turning instinctively toward the entrance. A shadow had fallen over them, long and sharp and utterly still. A woman was standing there, silhouetted against the bright mall entrance, but she wasn't just standing. She was observing, assessing, and her gaze was fixed directly on the hand Chad had clamped on my shoulder. My mother wasn't tall or muscle-bound. She was compact, wiry, dressed in faded jeans and a plain gray t-shirt. But the way she stood there, perfectly balanced on the balls of her feet, made her seem like she took up all the space in the entrance. She wasn't dressed for combat, but she was always armed. Her weapon was stillness. And in that moment, her stillness was screaming. Her eyes, the color of dark coffee, flicked from Chad's hand on my shoulder to Tiffany's grip on my sketchbook, to the faces of the two giggling girls who had suddenly fallen silent. It took less than a second, a full threat assessment. Chad, bless his tiny, protein-addled brain, tried to recover his bravado first. He puffed out his chest and actually squeezed my shoulder tighter. "This your mom?" he sneered, looking her up and down with disdain. "Come to pick you up before curfew?" My mom didn't answer him. She didn't even look at his face. Her gaze remained locked on his hand. She took a step forward, and then another. It was the kind of walk that didn't make a sound, the kind that ate up ground without any effort. It was the walk she used when she was stalking a new recipe in the grocery store, and it was the walk she probably used in places I couldn't imagine. With every step, the invisible bubble of her presence expanded, pushing the noise and the light of the food court away. "I will not ask you again," she said. Her voice was quiet. It was unbelievably quiet, yet it cut through the air like a razor. It wasn't a yell. It wasn't a threat. It was a simple statement of fact. Like saying the sky is blue or fire is hot. "Take your hand off my daughter." For a moment, I think Chad was actually going to do it. Some primal instinct in the back of his mind was probably screaming at him to run. But his ego was too big. He laughed a short, ugly bark. "Or what? You gonna ground me?" Tiffany, seeing her champion falter, jumped in. "We weren't doing anything," she whined, holding my sketchbook up like a shield. "We were just trying to be friendly, and she got all weird and aggressive. She's the one causing a scene." My mom's eyes finally moved. They shifted from Chad's hand to Tiffany's face. It was just a glance, but Tiffany flinched as if she'd been physically struck. My mom had a look I called her target-acquired face. It was devoid of all emotion, a terrifyingly blank slate that meant her brain was working faster than a supercomputer, processing outcomes, probabilities, and consequences. I knew what she was seeing when she looked at Chad. She wasn't seeing a high school bully. She was seeing angles of attack, pressure points, weaknesses in his stance. She was seeing the vulnerable tendon behind his knee, the brachial plexus origin in his neck, the precise spot on his elbow that would send a shock of white-hot pain all the way to his fingertips. "The book," my mom said, her voice still unnervingly calm. Her eyes were back on Tiffany now. "Give it back to her." "No way," Tiffany stammered, regaining a sliver of her usual defiance. "This is evidence of how weird she is. She held it tighter. That's when my mom moved. It wasn't fast, it was just efficient. She closed the remaining 10 feet between them in 3 silent steps. She didn't rush Chad. She simply walked through his personal space as if it didn't exist. She stopped right in front of him, so close their chests were almost touching. She had to look up to meet his eyes. Chad, to his credit, stood his ground, a smirk plastered on his face, though I could see a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "You have 3 seconds," my mom whispered. It was a promise. From the side, I saw a new figure approaching. A man in a slightly too tight blue security uniform, a walkie-talkie squawking on his hip. His name tag read, Paul. He had a self-important waddle and the weary expression of a man who spends his days telling teenagers to stop skateboarding. All right, what's all the commotion here?" Paul said, his voice trying for authoritative but landing somewhere near annoyed. Tiffany saw her chance. Her face crumpled into a mask of pure, theatrical victimhood. "Officer, thank goodness!" she cried out, pointing a trembling, acrylic-nailed finger at my mom. "This woman, she just came out of nowhere and started threatening us. We were just sitting here, and she started screaming at us." Paul's eyes narrowed, immediately focusing on my mom as the source of the problem. He saw a tense, coiled woman standing nose to nose with a high school kid. He didn't see the full story. He didn't see the slushie on my bag, the terror in my eyes, or the casual cruelty that had started it all. He saw what Tiffany wanted him to see. "Ma'am," Paul said, puffing out his chest and resting a hand on his belt, "I'm going to need you to step back. What seems to be the problem?" My mom didn't even turn to look at him. Her entire being was focused on Chad. "The problem," she said, her voice dropping another octave, "is that this boy has his hand on my daughter and is about to find out what a compound fracture feels like." Paul's face went from annoyed to alarmed. "Whoa, okay, that's a threat." He stepped forward, putting himself between my mom and Chad, facing her. "Ma'am, you can't talk like that. These kids told me you're the one harassing them. I'm going to have to ask you to calm down and leave the premises. Now." A small, almost imperceptible smile touched my mom's lips. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a predator that had just watched its prey wander into a perfectly laid trap. She slowly, deliberately raised her hands in a placating gesture, palms open. But it wasn't a gesture of surrender. It was a gesture that said, "I am not holding a weapon." The effect was immediate. The security guard Paul relaxed slightly, his hand moving away from his belt. Chad, seeing the guard intervene on his behalf, puffed his chest out even further, his grip on my shoulder becoming a painful vice. "See?" Chad grunted. "She's crazy. Tell her to back off." My mom's eyes never left Paul's, but her words were directed past him, a cold, clear warning shot. "The human body has over 200 bones. It is shockingly easy to break one. The radial nerve runs right along here," she said, her voice turning clinical, like a professor giving a lecture. She traced a line on her own forearm with a single finger. "A sharp, focused impact, and you lose all feeling in your hand. Permanently." Paul's face soured. "That's enough. I'm giving you one final warning. Leave, or I'm calling the police and having you arrested for trespassing and making terroristic threats." "Go ahead," my mom said, her voice a calm sea over a churning abyss. "Call them. Get the station sergeant on the line. Tell him that Colonel Miller sends her regards." Paul blinked. "Colonel who?" My mom's smile widened a fraction. "You heard me." She took a small step back, creating space, not out of retreat, but to change the geometry of the situation. It was a subtle shift, but I recognized it. She was preparing for action, not de-escalating. Tiffany, emboldened by the guard's presence, decided to push her luck. She was still holding my sketchbook. "Yeah, call the cops. We'll press charges for harassment," she declared loudly, making sure the gathering crowd of onlookers could hear. She even managed to squeeze out a crocodile tear. That was the wrong move. My mom's head snapped towards her. The shift was so fast, so sudden, it was like a hawk spotting a mouse from 100 feet up. All the quiet intensity that had been focused on Chad and the guard was now laser-beamed onto Tiffany. "You're holding something that doesn't belong to you," she said, and then she did something that made my blood run cold. She started speaking in a different language. It was a low, guttural language I'd heard her use on the phone late at night, a language that sounded like shifting gravel and dry wind. I didn't know what she said, but I knew what it felt like. It felt like an ancient curse. Tiffany stared, her mouth agape. What? What are you saying? My mom repeated the phrase, slower this time, her eyes burning into Tiffany's. Chad's bravado finally cracked. He let go of my shoulder as if my skin had suddenly become red hot, taking a stumbling step back. His face was pale. The two clones, Ashley and Brittany, were already backing away, eyes wide with fear. They didn't understand the words, but they understood the tone. It was the tone of absolute, unshakable authority. The kind of authority that doesn't come from a mall security badge. Paul the guard was flustered. Hey, English, we speak English here, he blustered, stepping forward again. My mom ignored him. Her focus was entirely on Tiffany, who was now trembling, my sketchbook held limply in her hands. My mom switched back to English, her voice now a terrifyingly soft whisper. In some parts of the world, the punishment for theft is to have the offending hand removed from the body. It's a messy but effective deterrent. She took a step towards Tiffany. Tiffany let out a small squeak and practically threw the sketchbook at me. I caught it against my chest, clutching it like a lifeline. She then scrambled backwards, bumping into a table and nearly falling over. My mom didn't even glance at me or the returned book. Her work wasn't finished. She turned her full attention back to the security guard, Paul, whose face was now a mixture of confusion and dawning apprehension. He was starting to realize he was out of his depth. Now, my mom said, her voice returning to its normal, calm pitch. As for your threat to call the police, she reached into the back pocket of her jeans and pulled out her wallet. It was a simple, worn leather wallet, but she didn't open it to show him a driver's license. She flipped it open to reveal a single, stark white card with an official-looking seal. She held it up for him to see. I find that this usually expedites the process. Paul squinted at the card. His face went from apprehensive to ashen. His eyes widened and he swallowed hard, a prominent bob in his throat. He looked from the card to my mom's face and back to the card. The self-important swagger drained out of him like air from a punctured tire. "Oh," he breathed. "Oh, my God." He took a clumsy step back, his hands coming up in a gesture of frantic surrender. I apologize, ma'am. Colonel, there's been a misunderstanding, a terrible misunderstanding." My mom didn't say a word. She just held his gaze, letting the silence do the work for her. Chad and Tiffany and their friends just stood there, frozen, looking back and forth between the terrified security guard and my mother, the pieces of the puzzle, finally, horrifyingly, clicking into place in their minds. "Sir?" a new voice cut in. We all turned. 2 uniformed police officers were walking briskly toward us. Someone, a concerned shopper, probably had called them after all. The first officer, a tall man with a stern face, looked at the scene. Me clutching my sketchbook, the bullies looking terrified, the security guard looking like he'd seen a ghost, and my mom standing in the center of it all, like the calm eye of a hurricane. "We got a call about a disturbance," the officer said, his eyes scanning the group, trying to figure out who was who. Paul the security guard practically tripped over his own feet, rushing to intercept them. "Officers, it's all right. Everything is under control. False alarm. Just a minor disagreement. It's been resolved." The officer looked skeptical. "Resolved? We were told a woman was threatening teenagers." He looked directly at my mom. Before my mom could even speak, a sleek black car pulled up to the curb just outside the food court entrance, a place where no civilian vehicle was ever allowed to stop. The car didn't look like a police cruiser or a taxi. It looked like something that transports diplomats or spies. The back door opened, and a man in a sharp dark suit stepped out. He scanned the food court, his eyes immediately finding us, and started walking purposefully in our direction, ignoring the no-entry signs completely. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and had an earpiece in one ear, and he was heading straight for my mom. The man in the suit moved with the same unnerving efficiency as my mother. He didn't rush, but he covered the ground from the curb to our little drama circle in a handful of seconds. The 2 police officers who had been focused on my mom turned to see him approaching. Their entire demeanor shifted from authoritative suspicion to confusion. "Ma'am, do you know this man?" the stern-faced officer asked, gesturing towards the newcomer. My mom finally pocketed her wallet and gave a slight nod. "He's my ride." The man in the suit stopped beside her. He didn't look at the cops, the security guard, or the bullies. He only had eyes for my mom. "Colonel Miller," he said, his voice a low baritone. "We have a wheels up in 30. Is there a problem here?" The word "colonel" hung in the air, thick and heavy. The two police officers exchanged a wide-eyed glance. Chad's jaw was on the floor, and Tiffany looked like she was about to be sick. The puzzle was no longer missing pieces. It was a completed portrait of their own stupidity, and they were staring right at it. "No problem, Agent Thompson," my mom replied calmly. "Just finishing up some family business." She turned her head slightly, and her gaze swept over the bullies. It wasn't a glare. It was worse. It was a dismissal. She had assessed them, dealt with them, and now, in her eyes, they simply ceased to exist. She turned to me. "You okay, honey?" I nodded, clutching my sketchbook to my chest. "I'm fine, Mom." "Good." She looked back at the cops. "Officers, my daughter was accosted by these individuals." She gestured with her chin towards Tiffany and Chad. "They damaged her property, and one of them put his hands on her. The security guard." She flicked a glance at Paul, who flinched. "Chose to believe their version of events without any investigation." The stern-faced officer's expression hardened, his attention now shifting fully to the bullies. "Is that true?" he asked, his voice now holding the iron authority it had lacked before. Tiffany opened her mouth, but only a squeak came out. Chad was staring at Agent Thompson, who had turned his head just enough to pin him with a cold, assessing stare. Chad seemed to shrink by several inches. They poured a slushie in her backpack," I said quietly, finding my voice. "On purpose." The officer's eyes fell to my damp bag and the spreading pink stain. His jaw tightened. He looked at Paul. "Did you see this?" Paul, the security guard, looked at the floor, the ceiling, anywhere but the police officer's face. I arrived after." "You didn't do your job," Agent Thompson finished for him, his voice flat. "Duly noted." The stern officer nodded at his partner. "Get their names and school information, and the guards. I want to have a chat with the head of mall security and the school principal tomorrow morning." His partner immediately pulled out a notepad. The sound of the pen clicking was like a gunshot in the now silent food court. The color drained completely from Tiffany's face. This was no longer about a ruined drawing. This was about a permanent record, about phone calls home, about a level of trouble they had never, ever imagined. My mom put a hand on my back. "We're leaving." She started to guide me towards the exit where the black car waited, its engine humming silently. Agent Thompson fell into step beside us, a silent, imposing guardian. As we walked away, I looked back over my shoulder. I saw Tiffany, Ashley, and Brittany huddled together, crying. I saw Chad being questioned by a police officer, looking utterly defeated, the swagger gone, replaced by the panicked fear of a boy who had picked a fight with a dragon and was only now realizing the size of its mother. And I saw Paul, the security guard, looking utterly broken as he handed over his ID. He had chosen the wrong side, and his easy, power-tripping life was probably over. For a moment I felt a tiny sliver of pity for them, but then I remembered the laughter, the feel of Chad's hand on my shoulder, the sick triumph in Tiffany's eyes as she held my art over the trash can. The pity vanished. This wasn't revenge. This was a consequence. My mom always said actions have consequences. When we got to the car, Agent Thompson opened the back door for me. The interior was dark leather and smelled clean and new. My mom slid in beside me. "Are you really a colonel?" I asked as the car pulled smoothly away from the curb. She looked at me, a real, warm smile finally reaching her eyes. "Among other things." She gently took my sketchbook from my hands and opened it to the page with the ruined dragon. She traced the bleeding ink lines with her finger. "This is good work, kiddo. The water damage gives it character. Makes it look like he's breathing fire." I looked at it again. She was right. The smudged red and pink looked like a burst of magical, misty flame. "They won't bother you again," she said, her voice soft now, all traces of the colonel gone, leaving only my mom. "I know," I said. It was true. They had seen something they couldn't comprehend. They had poked the quietest person in their school and summoned a force of nature they didn't know existed. They would tell the story for years, a whispered legend in the school hallways about the day a girl's mom showed up and the world tilted on its axis. And they would leave me alone. I leaned my head against her shoulder as the mall disappeared behind us. The day had started with the smell of trouble, but it was ending with the quiet, powerful presence of my mom. And for the first time in a long time, I felt completely and utterly safe, protected not just by a mother, but by a colonel. And I knew, without a doubt, that no one would ever mess with me again.